But I am excited that you are here today, and I'm excited to be able to continue on in this series of James. Who in here likes breakfast? A few of you? All right, let's get some breakfast. I just need some crowd participation this morning because you got an extra hour of sleep. Who in here needs, what's your favorite breakfast? Waffles, I like it. Bacon. That's not just breakfast, that's all, that's every. Donuts, there we go. Biscuits and gravy, there we go. Anybody else? Pancakes, eggs, there's a whole bunch of them out there. But one of my favorite all-time breakfasts, especially as a child, has to be cereal. Where's my cereal fans at? Any of you? There it is. There it is. I would ask you what your favorite cereal is, but I don't want to start a war within the room or online. But growing up, I had a favorite cereal, and it's objectively the best cereal. And the title is, no, that's terrible. Honey Bunches of Oats. Honey Bunches of, anybody out there with me? Honey Bunches of, my friends all looked at me like I was eating All Brand, like an old person, It's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you like Honey Bunches of Oats. It is amazing. I love it. I don't eat cereal a whole lot anymore, but man, every time that I can snag me some Honey Bunches of Oats, I'm all about that. Here's the problem with Honey Bunches of Oats. It is not targeted towards children, all right? Like, they don't have commercials that are coming out for kids like Honey Nut Cheerios or Lucky Charms or anything like that. It's not targeted towards kids. And I knew that at a very young age. You know why? Because there was no prize in a box of the Honey Bunches of Oats cereal. We would go through the cereal aisle and we'd see all the Captain Crunch and Fruit Loops and Lucky Charms and all of these amazing cereals. And do they still put prizes in the bottom of cereal boxes? I'm curious. I don't know. No? Probably not. It's probably a safety hazard. Someone got sued at some point probably. But they used to does anyone else remember this? They used to take this cheap plastic prize and shove it in the bottom and then fill it with cereal. And if you were in my house, you weren't allowed to open the box from the bottom to get the prize. You had to slowly wait. It's like playing the lottery with your cereal in the morning. Is the prize going to come out in my bowl? And whoever got it, coming from a family with 4 kids, whoever got it, it was their prize. And I think this is where James is leading in James chapter 4, when he starts talking about there's a prize at the end of this passage that he gives to his readers. There's an intentional prize that at the end of this passage, he sets it up that everyone's wanting, that everyone's looking forward to. And in Acts chapter 4, verses 1 through 10, which is where we're going to be today, he has this encouragement for his people. He says this, he says, listen, if you draw near to God, he will lift you up in honor. If you draw near to God, the consequences for drawing near to God is to be able to lift you up or exalt you or raise you on high or fulfill your purpose in your life. He will do that to you if you draw near to God in verse 10. And it's like this Rudy moment, right? Where this imagery of just being carried off the field. I mean, who doesn't like to be lifted up? James told them that God would give them the thing that they most wanted in the world if they would just draw near to him. So the readers of James were all about that life, right? They were all about it, and they wanted to be uplifted by God because God was their desire, right? This being lifted up by God was their desire. But in order to understand the desire to be honored, especially their desire to be honest, we need to do a little bit of research. We need to dig in a little bit. Because their desire to be honored isn't much different from our desire to be honored. Their desire to be honored isn't just something that they had. It's kind of like one of our human things that we really enjoy. It's a fundamental need. It's a universal desire to be known, truly known by the people that we care about. And what better way to be known than to have someone that you care about personally honor you, give you the recognition that you deserve, see what you're doing and call you out for it and lift you up and exalt you for it. When that person calls you out, man, it does something to our soul and we feel good. And there's nothing that money can't buy, or there's nothing that you'd be able to trade for it, because it makes us feel complete. It's the most true in emotional relationships that you connect. And we want to be loved by somebody. We want somebody to know us deeply and see the things that we do and to be able to recognize us for it, to be honored. So the readers of this passage, they derived their worth through being exalted by the thing that meant the most to them in this world. By God, who meant the most to them in this world, and it was what they were seeking. You see, our value systems come into play a whole lot when we really start thinking about who we want to be honored by. Because we pursue what we want to possess. Our value system sets us up to where we pursue what we want to possess. There's no different in James's readers. They have a biological desire to be lifted up and exalted by those that they hold in high esteem. When life is good, that's what we want. When life is bad, that's what we want. Especially by the people we value most. And so as a value system, we pursue what we want to possess. If you have kids or employees, or you're the leader of a group project at your school, or you're in any kind of leadership at any time, it doesn't take you very long to realize that not everybody's value system is the same. Am I right? Not everybody's value system is the same. It reminds me a lot of times of that show, Whose Line Is It Anyways? Where everything's made up and the points don't matter. A lot of times when you're leading, especially your kids or your family or your friends or people at work, and their value system, you're trying to do something to motivate them, and they're just kind of like, not even into it. I had this exact same thing happen the other day whenever I got an email from one of my kids' teachers. And it said on this test that he had been studying for that he only got 4 points on this. And I called him in. I was like, hey, bub, we need to talk. You are good at this. You studied this. How on earth did you get 4? They said there was 100 questions. There was 4 of them. You got a 4. What is going on? He's just like terrified, like, Dad, I'm sorry. Like, I thought I did really good. And I'm like, listen, dude, 4 out of 100 isn't good. That is not good. And he said, wait, I know I got more than 4 right. I said, well, no, your teacher said you got a 4. He's like, no, Dad. 4 means you could teach the class. And I was like, what? In their grading system, evidently they went and changed grading on me. I thought we were still getting A's, B's, C's, and D's. They went and changed it, and a 0 means you didn't even try. I had him help me with this because I forgot it already. A 1 means you don't understand even with help. A 2 means I need some help. A 3 means I can do it. I can almost teach it. And a 4 means I can teach the class. He got a great grade, and I sat here and went, no, that's a 4. That's very different. And our value systems, our grading systems were completely different. And it reminded me that there's a lot of things in our life where our value systems are in competition with other value systems. It's only when there's proper motivation that people change their behavior, that the behavior ends up changing, that the things that you're pursuing you want to possess. The things that you want, those are the things that you go after. And if you've ever raised a kid who grades don't motivate them, there's not much you can do because that value system of getting an A or a B or a C isn't what's going to push them further. I've had the opportunity to talk with a lot of people being an extrovert in my life. And there's one thing that I've recognized and realized that is universal throughout these people, throughout humanity, throughout at least the humans that I know, is that everybody's a hero of their own story. Everybody's the hero of their own story. And whenever we think about things, when we think about our motives, when we think about our desires, we're the hero of our own story. Even if we know that we're doing the wrong thing, we're doing it like a vigilante. We're doing the wrong thing for the right reason because we're the hero of our own story. We have that process hardwired in us to where we think the best of ourselves. I mean, think about it. What are some things that you want out of life? What are some things that you want out of life? Come on. Family, love, acceptance, friends, to be respected, to be loved, to be encouraged, serving, Those are all good things, am I right? Now the question is, how do we go about receiving those things? If we're hardwired to pursue the things that we want to possess, and the things that we want to possess are good, is that a problem? Well, I'm going to pursue this because this is the thing that I want. This is what James's readers were reading. I want God to uplift me. I want God to honor me, so I'm going to pursue that. But so often those two opposing worldviews, value systems, come together and one outweighs the other. And in general, it's easy for us to end up living along worldly wisdom, which is what Desiree spoke about last week. We end up leaning on our worldly wisdom rather than the wisdom of God. But if you know this, if there's more than two people in a room, if you put two people together, two competing value systems will seek fulfillment at the expense of the other. Our desires end up competing with one another because within countries, within businesses, within households, and even within our own minds. These competing value systems of things that we hold dear, the things that we want to possess, they end up in battle over this. And James recognizes this and understands this. And in verse 1, chapter 4, he calls it out. Because what happens when our desires go unchecked? Who's to blame for the conflict? Here's what it says. What is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. You are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it. So you fight and wage war to take it away from them, yet you don't have what you want. You don't have what you desire because you don't ask God for it. And even when you do ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong. You want only what will give you pleasure, you adulterers. Don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy with God? It wasn't just them that was struggling with this. James looks back on the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus used murder to express more than just the actual killing, but also the inward condition of our heart, shown outwardly by the anger that we have, showed outwardly by the actions that we take upon our brothers and sisters, upon our enemies, the actions that we take. The word kill is startling, and it's meant to startle. James wanted his readers to realize the destruction taking place, the destruction that pleasure in a worldly value systems can have. You see, it's easy for us to chase our own desires. All you have to do is go for it. You can do it. Whatever you believe, you can make it happen. You can be anything that you want. It's an attitude that we instill in our kids, and as a culture, we've taken it and ran with it. Said, yes, we can do it. It's easy to chase those desires, but what happens when those desires go unchecked? Or perhaps a better question that James is asking, who is checking your desires? We have an entire history of mankind demonstrating the failure of evil lustings to obtain the object of their desire. Finding fulfillment in our desires brings war, death, and brokenness because our desire to be honored by our value system reveals our self-worth. When our desire is met, our pleasure increases. And when our pleasure increases, we value those desires more. And if those desires are not godly desires, our values shift away from godly values to achieve desires of our hearts. There are very few people out there searching for something, buying something, looking for something that they don't want. When was the last time you went out shopping for something that you didn't want? When was the last time that you went out of your way to do something that you didn't want? Now, we do it all the time. I was at one of my kids had a soccer tournament, and it was an all-day soccer tournament. And we were sitting there like all good soccer parents, trying not to freeze along the sidelines. And we were there for 4 or 5 hours, and we were just sitting there. And I was talking with somebody, and a parent of another kid on my son's team started celebrating. And I looked up, I was like, oh shoot, I missed my kid scoring a goal or whatever it was. And I was like, what happened? What happened? And I looked up, and the other team just scored a goal. And I was like, what did I miss? Timeout. And the parent's like, yeah, we don't make it to the championship, we get to go home. His value system came out because his Saturday was important to him. Now, he was there, but he wasn't happy about it. The second that he had an opportunity for his actions to show his true values, he was able to take it. We do it all the time, but those value systems end up in competition. Our desire is always brought to light by our actions. And the human heart manufactures desires, frequently selfish ones. And these can range from the mundane, I just want a little peace and quiet, to the weighty, I want power and significance over others. And when someone prevents us from satisfying that desire, we are tempted to view that person as an enemy to be defeated. It doesn't take long for these pleasures to begin in grabbing the steering wheel of our life and driving us to a place that we never intended to go. But without boundaries, we become shells of who we were created to be. And we take what we were created for and throw it away. We throw away that design for the desire of our own hearts. That pleasure of our own hearts. And then we're surprised when there's death, destruction, brokenness in our world. It'd be easy here to believe that taking pleasure in things is wrong, but that's not what James is talking about here. Taking pleasure isn't wrong. Taking pleasure in things that don't glorify God is wrong. Our desires always end up destructive when it's not founded in God's value system. He says, you adulterers, don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy of God? I say it again, if you don't want to be a friend of the world, you make yourself, or if you want to be a friend of the world, you are an enemy of God. You see, oftentimes we see the world as this thing, especially as believers, we see the world as this thing that's outside, this thing that's outside us, and that's the world, and we're not the world. But we forget the part of us that is fallen within. Our human nature that is fallen and that seeks our own value system. We seek our own desires. We seek the desires just like we seek the prize at the end of the cereal box, at the bottom of the cereal box. So how do we live a life where we will be exalted by God, where we'll be honored by God? He doesn't leave us on an island. He tells us, and it's in verse 7. I'm going to read verses 7 through 10, and here's what it says. So humble yourselves before God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Come close to God and he will come close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, for your loyalty is divided between God and the world. Let there be tears for what you have done. Let there be sorrow and deep grief. Let there be sadness instead of laughter. Doesn't sound like a prize at the end of the cereal box. Let there be gloom instead of joy. Humble yourself before the Lord, and he will lift you up in honor. See, God fights for the humble person who has surrendered to him. This surrender has a number of facets, and he bids them to meet God, rid themselves of polluting attitudes, and allow God to renew their spirits. And by this, a person claims victory over flesh and the devil. You see, human values will always produce self-righteous desires. Human values will always produce self-righteous desires. However, a desire for God's values requires a posture of humility. If we want to set out for God's values in our life, we can't set out with the desire to be uplifted. We have to set out with the desire to be humble, with the desire to surrender everything about ourselves. We have God's values that are in place before we set our desires. As believers, we are not immune to believing that our values are good enough to persuade our desires. And as believers, it gets really easy, especially when you've been a Christian for a while, to believe, well, I'm a good person, that my values there will translate my desires. But when we begin desiring things with our human values, we will always produce self-righteous desires. James encourages his readers to humble themselves before God. Draw near to God. And here's a few ways that we are able to do this today, and we're going to have this opportunity to do this today. It means to draw near and worship. in prayer, in praise to God, setting aside our desires and hearing from Him, making Him the center of the show. It means to draw near to God, humbling yourself, putting your desires on hold, and living in a community and being open and honest and asking for wisdom from a community, from other believers. It means to draw near by enjoying communion with God, by setting aside time to allow Him to speak to us. Setting aside time by allowing Him to examine the desires of our heart and say, are these human desires or are they godly desires? It means going through the box, the entire box, to get the prize at the end, not just saying, hey, I want God to lift me up because I want to be lifted up. It's humbling ourselves before the Creator of the universe because we have all fallen short of the glory of God. And it becomes really, really, really easy for us to set out even for a good thing, even for a good human desire, and we place our morals in the way to get there. It's easy for us to begin justifying how good we are. And James goes through it and he says, listen, it's not about you. It's not about you. Let there be tears for what you have done, because I have been a part of the wars that he was talking about. I've been a part of the brokenness that he was talking about. Let there be grief. Let there be sadness. And the joy of the Lord will be your strength. When we present ourselves to God in a posture of humility, saying, listen, I don't want my earthly desires. I want to start off with your values in my life and allow my desires to move to grow from your values, to grow from your heart, to grow from what you have called us to do. Oh, it changes the way that we live. I'm going to ask Kayla to go ahead and come on up, and she's going to sing a song for us, because we're going to have an opportunity to do exactly what James was calling his readers to do. It's the prize at the end of the cereal box to be uplifted, but when that becomes our desire, when that becomes our sole desire, to be uplifted, for God to uplift us, and for God to hold us up in honor, we're missing the point. Because now it's about my works, now it's about my goodness, as opposed to His. The Lord's Supper, which we're gonna have an opportunity to partake in today, is all about receiving the grace that should not be available to us. Receiving a grace that should not be ours. But He gives grace. The same Holy Spirit convicting us of our compromise will also grant us the grace that He desires for us to be able to serve a world. This is a wonderful statement, but His grace is enough. He gives more than enough grace in our life. And it stands in strong contrast to the previous words. So we're gonna receive communion here in a moment, and I'm gonna tell you what I want you to do. I'm gonna give some instructions here. And we've got tables over here on each of the sides and up in the front, and whichever area you want to end up kind of moving to as Kayla begins to sing. Sometime throughout her song, I just want you to move up, and I want you to take a cup and a piece of bread. And I want you to return to your seats and have a moment where you're drawing close to God. And I believe in my heart that God is going to return that favor, and He's going to draw close to us. So as you go back to your seats with these elements that represent the grace that we were freely given, that we did not deserve, that we couldn't earn for our works, and we were never good enough for, I want you to hold them, and we'll all partake at the end of the song. I'll come back up and give some more instruction. But I want you to observe this week I want you to think about how weak I am and how strong He is. How proud we are. How servant-like He is. How wrong we can be. And how infallible He is. How changing we are with how immovable He is. How provoking we are and how forgiving He is. And how in us there's only self. And in Him there's only good. It draws our goodness forth. It draws our goodness from us by taking a posture of humility that I am not enough. I can only bring hurt. I can only bring brokenness. Why is there so much quarreling among you? Why is the life that I've been given not what anything I wanted? I was pursuing a possession that I really, really wanted, and it was even good, but I was pursuing it with my earthly values. God, have I been pursuing your values over everything? Have your values been influencing my desires? God fights on the side of the humble person who's surrendered to Him. So Kayla's going to lead us in this song. It's a new song. Most of you won't know it. But as she sings, at some point throughout the song, I invite you to make your way to the table. Sit down and ponder those thoughts and ideas of how fallible we are and how infallible He is.